advisory meeting for Wednesday, June the 11th, 2025. May I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Bills?
Here.
Ms. Bell? Here. Hale?
On busy.
Mr. Romano?
Here.
Here.
Yes.
Later. Ms. Will? Ms. Milford? No.
Thank you. First order of business, I could share these. Take a motion, have a motion to allow Oliver to participate via Zoom.
I'll make a motion to allow Olivia Gale to participate via Zoom.
I have a second. Second. Favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, welcome. Can you hear us okay?
It's a little mumbled. Hola from Spain. Glad to be among you.
Okay, can we adjust the sound to?
Olivia, what the chair was saying is that we accept your deposit of $10,000 to be allowed into this meeting.
Okay. I only have euros here.
That's okay. It's okay.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you.
But we're gonna have to put a tariff on that. So.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Spain.
Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at the May 21st, 2025 meeting minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, there a motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented.
I make a motion to accept minutes.
Motion by Linda,
Second.
second by Norby. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Did anyone sign up for neighborhood input?
No one has signed up.
Is there any old business to come before? Okay, moving right along. Now we get into the fun part. Under new business, we are going to be receiving the city manager's update on the initial revenue fund recommendations in the 2026 preliminary budget that will be presented next week at the joint conference workshop between the FAB and the city commission. So with that, I will turn it over to the city manager and staff. And as we go along, feel free to ask questions. Just motion for them. Did you have a question on a particular item during that part of the budget? That, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought I'd move over into the hot seat that all of my directors have had the opportunity to sit in over the past several weeks and months. To want to acknowledge the Office of Management and Budget for their leadership in developing the preliminary budget, and as we move forward, the proposed budget. Thank you to the Budget Advisory Board for your commitment and your investment in this process. It's great to hear the taxpayers' perspective and to understand what's important for our neighbors. When I saw the taxable values come in at 8.15%, I was very excited. I'm like, okay, it's my first year as city manager. I potentially won't have to deal with furloughs or hiring freezes or dramatic cuts. And I know that some of our neighboring cities in Broward County, Dade County, they're a lot more challenged than we are this year, considering where the values have come in. However,
Any examples of that?
well, my former city, Miami Beach, only got 5% this year. So I think we should be very grateful and feel fortunate. But we never want to rest on our laurels. We never want to assume that we will always have that kind of growth. And so this year we were very thoughtful and meaningful in the way that we approached the budget development process. I met with each and every department, some departments multiple times, fire, police, some of the bigger ones where we couldn't get through everything in one sitting. And I think we probably spent 3 or 4 or 5 hours a piece for those departments. One of the things that I stress to all of our department heads is to look for opportunities to generate revenue and to also save money, whether for the short term or for the long term. What are some of the things that we can do to try to be fiscally responsible and think outside of the box, even more so than we've always done in previous years? So having to weigh all of the budget requests against all of the commission priorities and looking at the strategic plan, we've come up with a budget proposal on a preliminary basis, because obviously we don't have the final numbers from the property appraiser yet, but this is a good indication of where we are likely to land. I'm hoping that it goes up a bit. And that has typically been the trend, that the preliminary number is a little bit lower than the final number. Some of the focus areas from a strategic perspective for me has been on capital projects. One of the things that I identified early on in the process, even before joining the city, is that we have a lot of capital project needs in terms of funding as well as technical resources and expertise. And I wanted this budget to focus on filling those gaps, especially for long delayed capital projects that we've been discussing as a city for a number of years, but for whatever reason, we couldn't fund those projects and get it across the finish line. Also public safety, one of those areas that we always try to focus on an annual basis. This year, my focus was more so on public safety infrastructure. So if you've seen the preliminary memo, you'll note that we have some investments that we are proposing, and we'll get into that a little bit more in detail. But I want to make sure that our public safety professionals have the right resources, the right facilities to be able to do their jobs well and to have the response times that are required to service our community appropriately. So we're looking at about 17.1 million in additional revenue above and beyond the prior year. And on top of that, we've had a great year in terms of some one-time revenue sources. So we have a PFAS settlement, as well as fire assessment, surtax. All of those come together to help us be a lot more flexible and creative this year in the way that we propose an allocation of resources. So with the PFAS settlement, we're anticipating in the current fiscal year 14.3 million, which we have not yet done a budget amendment for. So we are strategizing now on the ways that we can appropriate those funds. And as you know, when you have a one-time funding source, it's best to use it for a one-time purpose. And I'm trying to focus on capital projects with that funding. We also anticipate about 4.8 million in the PFAS settlement for the fiscal year 26 budget, which you would have seen identified in the memo. And because of this great opportunity that we have this year and the current climate as it relates to emergency management and FEMA, we recently had a briefing with our emergency management contractor, and we talked about some of the challenges that we are likely to face as we go through the hurricane season. We've seen what's been happening across the country with different cities and states experiencing catastrophic disasters and not necessarily knowing that we have the support from FEMA that we are used to having. So this year, for the first time, we're proposing an emergency management reserve. And essentially, we're looking at that $4.8 billion settlement from PFAS for fiscal year 26 to fund the emergency management reserve. So it would not impact our neighbors. It's essentially found money, and we can put it aside so that if we do have those emergency expenditures and we're not able to get reimbursed from FEMA, then we're prepared. As far as the fire assessment, we are looking at $10.4 million in revenue if we go to full cost recovery. And essentially, we would like to translate that assessment into capital project infrastructure for the fire department, including $7.1 million for EMS Substation 88 and the Heron Garage Substation, as well as Fire Station number 13. You've probably heard Chief Golan talk about these projects year after year after year. And one of the themes that I've had with the team this year is that I don't want to hear about it anymore. Let's fund it, let's figure it out, let's get it done. Another focus area has been on information technology. Our public safety teams in fire and police, they have been challenged, and we've been challenged citywide just in general with a lack of information technology resources from a personnel standpoint. For a organization of our size, we are underfunded in information technology, and I know our former director, Tamika McKay, and Angela Marinas, our current acting director, went through all the details associated with that in one of these meetings. And so we want to invest in information technology, personnel, and resources to support our public safety departments to ensure that they have all the tools they need on a day-to-day basis. So you'll see some investments there that I think are pretty significant, but really speak to the vision and values that we have as a city moving forward. I do want to ensure that you all recognize that we are very strategic in our approach and thoughtful. We're trying to fund some things this year that were anticipated for fiscal year 2027, some bridges and capital projects that we're trying to advance now, since we do have some additional resources available, so that in future years, when we may not be as lucky in having those one-time fund generators, we want to try to take care of some things now in advance so that we're not scrambling and struggling in future years. So with that being said, I just want you to know that we have really put our all into developing this budget. Of course, again, it's still preliminary. We have some placeholders. I know we've talked about community groups and organizations. Right now, some of them have been reaching out to us, trying to identify if they're going to be part of the funding strategy for this year. And we are going to be working on that as we come up with the proposed budget. Just yesterday, I know there was a discussion about the CRA at a recent BAB meeting just yesterday or 2 days ago. Our CRA was voted to be extended by Broward County, and so that is moving forward. As you know, we're going to be funding it at 50% of the tax increment. And so just want to keep you abreast of some of the things that are still at play. And as we develop the proposed budget, I'm going to be recommending some strategic reorganization techniques. As I've mentioned, that probably every meeting leading up to my appointment, and even with some of our community groups, I'm looking at the organization overall. I'm recognizing some gaps, some opportunities. I think there's some room for restructuring, and we've already taken that into account with the budget development process, and there'll be more details on that as we propose the budget in the next couple of weeks. So thanks for your time, and I'm going to turn it over to our capable team, Laura Reese, Yvette Matthews, and just really grateful to all the members of the team here today who put in a lot of work to get us to this point. So thank you.
Manager Williams, Laura Reese, acting assistant city manager, former budget director, position. So Yvette and I are going to tag team the presentation tonight. So the first items, first I'll review what we're going to be going over. As the chair indicated, it's our preference, if you have a question, to go ahead and stop me and ask it as we go through, and we'll try to get you the answer, and then we'll move along through the presentation. So the first item we'll be talking about is ad valorem. The city manager did already touch on that, so I'll go through that briefly. Then the fire assessment. We'll look at the overall tax bill and what that would look like for an average single family homeowner. We'll go through some key revenue and expenditure changes, strategic enhancements. That's what the departments have been talking to you about in the prior meetings. So you'll learn a little bit about the key things that are being recommended for funding in the general fund. Commission priorities, we're going to share with you how the budget aligns with the priorities that the commission set at their January workshop. Then we'll be going through special event funding. That's something that's been really important to this board, so we thought that would be important to highlight as we move forward. Community investment plan, you know, all of our capital projects, which are the $100,000 or more, like the big ones. And then replacement plans, which we believe are really important. We want to make sure that we're not just investing in new, but also refreshing the equipment that we currently have. And then planning for the future. So with that, the city manager already sort of touched on ad valorem. This chart shares really the last few years and what's happened with our ad valorem value. We've had some really significant growth in our, you know, and a lot of that has been driven by the net new construction. Last year, when we talked about net new construction going down to just $500 million, everyone sort of was like, oh man, this is maybe the end of the good years, but we saw it come back again this year. So we're back to over $1 billion in new construction. And so we really feel lucky that that is on the roll this year. I joked with the city manager that I think she brought the money cloud and good vibes with her when she came, because we thought this.
Miami Beach.
She took it from, so I mean, I think we were the beneficiary of Miami Beach's, you know, the transition here. So, you know, we're really all very, very fortunate that this budget was a lot better than what we thought it was going to. You know, this is a part of it, the net new construction that hit the roll. And just as a reminder, it's the taxable values are as of January 1st. So anything that's come online since then would be on the next tax roll. One of the things that we really look to is what percent of the general fund revenues are generated by ad valorem. It's 48% in the current preliminary budget, and that's really good. What that tells us is that we're not overly reliant on taxable values to fund our operating budget. When we have our bond folks come in, like Moody's and S&P, and they're looking at our operations, they point to this as one of our strengths, that we have a diversified revenue source. So we have fire assessment. If the values go down, fire assessment rate doesn't go down, so that revenue is stable. So we're at 48%. That's a really good spot for the city to be. And that's lower than what a lot of cities are. A lot of cities are far more reliant on property taxes. And that makes us less reliant on the economic conditions. As the manager mentioned, the ad valorem revenue is going to generate 17.1 million more than what we received last year based on the June 1st values. Then quickly, a fire assessment update. This is a change from what we saw last year. I don't know if y'all remember, we lowered the fire assessment rate last year, or the fire assessment fee, by $10. And a big reason we did that was because we had capital in the prior year that we could collect for, and then we didn't in last year. So the rate went down. So this year we did a full new cost recovery study, and we engaged a consultant. They looked at all of the operations. You know, I'd like to acknowledge the fire rescue department. They're a big part of this, sharing how they operate. What they talked about was the effective response units and how they respond to different emergencies. One of the primary things that helped us is there's a lot of emergency, the ambulances or the EMS responses now have 3 people, and the third person can be counted as part of the fire response. So that's really changed how they look at the effective response, and it allowed us to do full cost recovery at a higher level. And so our full cost recovery this year is an increase of $75 from last year. And so we're recommending a full cost recovery, which is going from $328 to $403, which is $75 more per residential unit. And really, as the manager indicated, we're directly correlating the additional revenue generated of 10.4 million to some capital needs that were really needed for the fire station. So the downtown EMS substation 88, fire station 13, and the Heron Garage. And then we know that over time there'll be increased staffing and operating costs associated with this as well. All right, so each year, and I think you all asked for this a couple of years ago, so we keep doing this. This is what a trim notice or a tax bill would look like for average taxable value for a single family home. So the average single family home in Fort Lauderdale is $641,000. And each year, if you have Save Our Homes exemption, your rate your taxable value goes up by the CPI change, which this year is 2.9%. So an average property at the same millage rate, the millage rate would generate $2,640. That's the amount that would be on the tax bill for that. Voter approved debt is, we have our debt amounts that were approved by voters. So the payments, for example, for the police headquarters or the parks fund. And as the taxable base decreases, the rate increases, the rate decreases. So the denominator gets larger, the rate gets smaller. So the voter approved debt, the rate will get smaller and the amount paid by each for each mill would go lower. So we're expecting a $15 increase for properties related to this. Then the stormwater assessment, we anticipate a 15% increase in that fee, which is $49 per year. And for fire assessment, just to reiterate, $75.
You said the voter debt is going down $50.
So the 1.5, I'm sorry, did it?
You said it would increase it by 15. That's why I was like, I think.
Yeah, so the voter approved debt will result in a decrease of $15. So, excuse me.
He said increase.
Yeah, that's what you said. I said increase.
That's what I was like. I
That's
think
the one
it's a
decrease.
50-50
Thank you for
Which
that.
is a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So our mayor really likes to talk about that in the monthly amount for employees. I'm sorry.
Can you clarify the fire assessment, just back a second, where you showed the $75 mark per parcel? If it's a multifamily unit property, say there's 4 units, would that generate 4 times the 75, or is it just 75 on that particular piece of property? I know because condos,
Per unit.
condo owners get a separate bill, but apartments house and specific.
For high rise units.
Yeah.
It's per residential unit, so each unit, so a condo would get that fee for each unit.
Yeah.
And so, bottom line is, an average single family homeowner would pay an additional $183 a year, which equates to $15.25 a month, 3 cups of coffee. So that's kind of what we like to equate it to, because a lot of people do have that on their mortgage, so it is paid monthly, so $15 a month.
Well, but it's safe to point out that primarily the increase is going to fund EMS Station 88, the overpass Station 13. And if you recall, when that fire bond, big bond passed 15 years ago, it was voted and they were debt payments added on to the tax bills, and it's since when.
That's part of that debt service
So that was it.
rate, yeah. So the amount that was part of the original debt was still part of that voter
Okay.
approved debt.
Additional stations, and it's only fair that we do a cost recovery.
Right. So I'll just highlight a few changes without going through one by one. On the left side is going, what's presented is the increase by key function. So public safety is always our largest increase. So $17.4 million increase in public safety, which is really full increase in our ad valorem, just right about that same amount. The second highest increase is culture and recreation. And then on the right, if you look at the key changes in expense, if you look at the first 3, which is salary and wages, pension, and health insurance, that equals 19.3 million. So it's just over what our increase in taxable value generated. Question. Scheduled. Go ahead.
At first glance, general public looks at that 3.2 million transfer to the community investment. It makes you think that we're decreasing CIP, but we're not decreasing just the transfer.
So the reason for the decrease is the CIP, we're in a really high interest earning environment right now. And so the CIP is its own fund. It has earned significant interest over the last year. And so we're using some of that interest to offset the transfer from the general fund. So we didn't actually decrease our CIP. The amount that we're planning to transfer or to fund in CIP is actually going up over what we got scheduled for this year, based on some of the manager's guidance on trying to advance some of these projects. But because we had some interest earnings, we're able to offset how much we have to transfer from the general fund.
Historic.
So it's usually about $20 million a year. This year, it ends up being almost $22 million. But that's just what.
1.5.
We're thinking about sidewalks and.
Oh, yes. So we're still doing the sidewalks, we're still doing a lot of the year over year initiatives that you're accustomed to. So 1.5 for sidewalks, 2.5 for streets, which is a little higher than what we've historically done. City-owned seawalls, 1.5, and then bridge restoration has gone up $1 million this year, just to make sure that we're advancing those priorities.
So for the general public, when they watch video, just thank you for that clarification, because I can see some of the naysayers saying, oh, look, they're decreasing capital improvement projects in the city when we need them, so.
Good clarification. So, one of the things you'll also see up there is 3.2 million in new debt service for the police headquarters. That's the overage about the 100 million that we had to finance. So that becomes permanent debt in fiscal year 26. So we'll have to start paying on that. And then scheduled equipment replacement plans are a little more expensive this year than in prior years, $1.9 million. On the bottom side, in terms of decreases, in addition to the transfer to CIP, we all have talked a lot about the transfer to the CRA that is going down. So the net amount of 4.6 accounts for the increase to Central City and the increase in value in Northwest as well. So that's why that number looks a little bit different than the 6 million that you may be expecting to see, because that's the net transfer, the net decrease in transfer from the general fund. Micro mobility, the manager did talk about this a little bit, but it was a big win for the city. The county is now directly giving us funds, and we have a little more control of how we're allocating them. So we'll be using them to fund micro mobility, which was previously funded in the general fund, and that's the $1.5 million decrease. The service isn't decreasing, but the general fund has some more capacity to fund other needs because it's no longer needing to fund this from our general operating budget. And the last slide I'll go over with you before handing it over to Yvette is some key changes in revenue. Other than the ad valorem and the fire assessment, some other key changes were increase in electric, water, gas, and utility franchise fees. We have long-term agreements with these organizations like People's Gas and FPL, which dictate the rate that the city collects. And so what this means to us is that there's additional usage in our community or higher rates. So if your electric bill is higher, the city gets 10%. For example, for a franchise fee, the city is going to be bringing in additional revenue. So the net additional revenue that we'll be bringing in from all of those sources is an additional $5.9 million. The manager talked about PFAS and how that money will be used. Another one we'll highlight is general administration service revenue. The general fund services such as budget or HR or finance, they provide services to all funds, stormwater, water, sewer. And so this would just be a cost recovery through a cost allocation model. And the additional amount generated is 1.5 million this year. And then increase in public safety, parks, recreation, and cultural service revenue. This would be, charges for service as you play tennis or softball or things like that. It's coming in around $886,000 higher. P-card rebate revenue came in higher. I know Ross probably remembers this from revenue estimating. Talked a little bit about that. And then last year we used some fund balance to balance our budget, and we're not doing that this year. So that's why you see it decrease in appropriated fund balance, is we're not using any one-time fund balance to budget our ongoing operating budget. With that, I'll turn it over to Ida.
Awesome, thanks, Laura. So Laura, let me do the fun part of this presentation, which is talking about all of the service enhancements. So you all have heard about a lot of these programs directly from the department, so I won't go into too much detail. But I wanted to highlight that there are really three key initiatives that are happening within the city manager's office. The first one is one that you're all very familiar with, which is supporting homeless. So we're initiating some new programs this year. The first one is supportive sheltering services for condition-specific housing that's related to mental health support as well as substance abuse support. And this project will support 20 people at any given time, but it allows for those specialized services for those who are experiencing specific conditions. There's also a pilot for the safe parking program. And this is really intended to provide a pathway to sustainable housing for individuals, but in the interim, to provide a safe place where they can try this parking pilot. And it's something the commission has discussed a few times. So this is currently in the budget as one-time funding to fund the pilot to see how those efforts play out and then to determine whether or not it's something that we would continue.
I have a question on that. Are we allowed to ask questions now?
Absolutely.
So
And I have Chris here too, and Chris will jump in at any point, so yes. Thank you.
So going over the homelessness and you know, we've had a problem with this in our city, and then it kind of got better, it's gotten worse again. And my question is where would they go? Who are we giving this money to? Because I know that there's 3,000 beds in the state, there's 3,000 beds in the county.
No,
We have,
how many beds are in the county?
yep,
600,
Between 600 and 700
in the
countywide.
county,
yes.
Yeah.
there's 3,000 beds, 501c3s that support homelessness, including mental issues. And I'll get you those statistics. I don't know. I got those statistics from Broward Partnership, and that's how many we have around. I don't know if it's definitely not the city. So my question is, where are we sending them? Are we just renting units and having our own people take care of them, or are we sending them to a bona fide
So
institution?
we're using real experienced service providers. So we've had funding the last year and then this year again for a facility in Hollywood is Miami Rescue Mission. They provide general emergency shelter services, develop housing plans and employment plans to try to get people into the next phase of their living situation. The funding, $250,000 are two entities work for now. One's Homes United. They provide home-based or residential-based supportive service housing. And then Fellowship, which provides substance and drug and alcohol substance recovery housing. So we've had both of those under contract through a grant for the last 6 months or so. They've been helpful in helping clients not only find housing for an interim period, but also progressing to that next phase of housing for them. So we want to continue that relationship and continue to use those services.
So the money is sent to organizations and then they kind of
We
contract, so it's sort of a discretionary, for lack of a better word, grant to organizations and they.
Well, we contract with them, so we have an agreement with that organization. It has certain things that we need them to do.
Sure.
It has performance measures. We built in outcomes to that as well. So they're it's a formal agreement with them. It's not necessarily a grant. We're paying for this.
No, I said for lack of a better word,
Sure, yeah,
basically, we're
yeah.
giving them money semi-discretionary and we trust that organization.
And most of these contracts are built on the number of units, so people serve. So it's paying for specific services.
Guarantees of the beds.
So with things like House Bill 1365 and the need to, if we're enforcing that, which is the camping prohibition, the idea is that we have opportunities to offer for somebody that's in violation, if they're willing to take the service, we have to place the refer.
Yeah, hasn't that been the issue is not having the support available, it's having them say, okay, let's go.
Yeah, so, when we talk about 600-700 shelter beds, those are emergency shelter facilities, so there are homeless assistance centers that Broward Partnership operates, Salvation Army primarily, so both those organizations, Broward Partnership is actively pursuing an expansion to the number of shelter beds they have. Salvation Army is a little behind on that, but also pursuing additional shelter.
The Henderson one also, that's for behavior.
Just behavioral health, yeah, we partner
Are
with
we
them
not
as
using
well.
that? 'Cause I thought we were using.
We are.
You had, hi.
No, I just, ideally, I guess, when we're talking about the, and I did just, AI says there's 700 emergency beds, so that's what it's, we have this for, beds available, but, how many, what would be our goal for total beds available ideally? And I understand there's a, like, you know, that not all people want the beds, but I guess in general, you know, I understand about the 250,000 and that would, you know, provide at least like a couple dozen additional beds, but how many beds do you think we need ideally?
So
For an emergency basis, not part of the continuum of care, like.
yeah, so I mean, it should all be through the continuum because that's the process to get people into the shelters, then into a housing situation. So it's built to progress them from coming off shelter to to shelter to housing and go through that process. Ideally. Hard to put a number on that. It is pretty hard because you don't want to because you have one more going to meet. You want to have enough to be available for those that want to take it. So we're not quite there yet with that number, but I could give you a hard number.
But it's not like we're only at like 50% of needs. Like, it sounds like that generally we're.
Yeah, we probably have 700 to 900 unsheltered people in and around Fort Lauderdale at any given time. So again, looking at about 700 emergency shelter beds, understanding that when people go in those beds, they're not counted as unsheltered, but they're also not being processed. Beds the occupied for a period of time. So it's a constant cycle in and out of those services.
Thank you.
I just have two related questions. Number one, we talked about at some point, I think I saw this in here about purchasing the community court space. I know I think you might be getting to that in just a minute. But at some point too, we also talked about the police station, the old previous jail. I didn't see anything in that. Is that still something we're considering as, assuming they were not able to do anything with individuals who are, you know, living on the streets and to enforce the state law?
So the jail stands right now cannot be used.
Okay.
Because everybody did.
Okay.
Yeah, it takes substantial.
Okay.
So it's actually better to tear that down.
Okay.
We are still looking at possible operations to help them.
Okay. And hopefully the county comes up with something between then, right? But yeah, okay. Thanks.
So another major initiative within the city manager's office, I'm sorry.
Before we move on.
Yes, sir.
You're asking about taxpayers to fund additional 450 rest homes problem. That part of it was created to Senate bill from Florida, it's an unfunded mandate. And you see, or is there any request from the city to the state to help alleviate some of those additional funding sources? And we're now starting to put rumored in the community that because Palm Beach County is cracking down at the sheriffs enforcing the ordinance as well as Miami-Dade County, and we're not here in Broward County Sheriff, so we're starting to see an influx come from the two surrounding counties into Broward as a result of that.
And I think our communities are seeing that too. I mean, from a taxpayer standpoint, our businesses in our neighborhood, we are seeing a significant influx and an uptick in the businesses. And our police force have been awesome because they've been working with the businesses, but there's only so much they can do because if they can't remove them, they can just ask them to move along. It's really, especially the business in our neighborhood have been really impacted by it. I know that's a big concern.
I think the feeling is how much do we shoulder on our backs, taxpayers' dollars for this issue that no one's helping us with, and they're forcing it on us in the city.
So we are pursuing funding. I mentioned we had a grant this year for 2 of the services that we're looking to fund going forward. We'll try to get grants for that again, but we felt it was necessary to bridge that gap between when they expired and when we could be eligible for those grants at a later date. We also asked for $500,000 from the state along with United Way to help start funding for additional shelter space. The United Way has come forward and said they're interested in pursuing. It could be in the form of a hotel or some sort of existing facility that they would renovate. That's still in the state budget, so that's something that's still in play. So we are constantly pursuing other funding sources to help support this program.
How do you see the county addressing the influx coming from the two other counties that they're enforcing the stricter requirements?
Say the county, do you just mean in general, or do you mean from an enforcement perspective? You mentioned the sheriff's department in Palm Beach County and Miami-Dade, so I'm not.
The enforcement's the enforcement.
How would they enforce it?
So, I mean, it's well documented what our sheriff's department's been willing to do to assist not just the city of Fort Lauderdale, but all municipalities within the county enforcing municipal ordinance violations, which, you know, the camping prohibition is a municipal ordinance violation. So right now, there is a limit to what our law enforcement can do to enforce that ordinance. And that's really limited by what our partners are willing to do to help us in fully enforcing our local.
It's Ross's question, Palm Beach County, I think they're using the enforcement tool for the frequent liar.
Yeah, many communities are, I mean, and that's nationwide. Yeah, and really what you see in those communities are strong partnerships between the folks that run the correction facilities and the courts in those communities, and what their willingness to partner with their municipal partners has been. That's the big difference.
In other words, we don't have those types of partnerships. Is that right?
Well, Chris, would it just be fair to say that, you know, currently our county sheriff, Sheriff Gregory Tony, I don't know how different he is from the sheriffs of Miami-Dade or Palm Beach. I mean, are they, obviously Sheriff Gregory Tony, who operates, he is not subject to answer to the county commission. He operates, you know, on his own. He does not want to criminalize homeless, and he's been very open about not accepting any violators of House Bill 1365, and also stating that, you know, it costs $200 a night to put someone in prison. Are these other sheriffs in the other counties actually taking people into jail? Is that what's now happening? Do you know?
I don't know specifically, does, the other two counties are taking individuals that county families.
Okay. So they are taking them into jail.
And I would say, you know, we've said this on the record, we're not looking to criminalize homelessness either. What we're looking to do is make sure that we have the appropriate amount of leverage so that we can appropriately enforce our ordinances and get compliance with those ordinances. And a lot of that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to reach that ultimate point of the enforcement process, but it's known that you could, and that helps us get compliance earlier on in the process. So it's all part of looking at how we enforce and what leverage we have to add, use our municipal ordinances for the intended purpose.
Just to add, clarify, there's some jurisdictions that if there's a violator of the municipal ordinance and they are offered a shelter bed and they refuse the shelter bed, that's the point at which they are arrested.
Okay.
That's if they're breaking the law. Right?
If they're in violation of the camping ordinance,
Yeah.
yes.
In the streets and there's no tent.
Right.
They're just sleeping on a bench.
Just giving some context for what some other places are doing.
And I haven't seen a tent in a while.
I don't see at any given time, especially with these resources, we have a place available, so with that idea in mind, we would generally have a place to take somebody if they were willing.
If they're willing.
Yeah, that's the issue, is the ones that aren't willing, which is the same people we see on the corners every day. Same, you know, they don't want help, unfortunately.
So the next major initiative coming out of the city manager's office is economic development. One of the things you've heard about in the commission meetings would be the airport workforce training program. This was supported by the Education Advisory Board. And really, this comes out of a study that was conducted by Broward College, which shows that there's a significant shortage of aviation technicians within this area. And as we diversify the economy in the city of Fort Lauderdale, this was targeted as one of the areas that both an education standpoint, but also an economic development standpoint would be important. As well as the development or introduction of a chief economic development officer. And this person will really be the person that serves as a cornerstone for the city's economic development plan over the next few years, making sure that we're making data-driven decisions associated with economic development. And then the last one is really providing assistance to our neighbors. So the educational scholarships were an initiative that the commission supported starting this year, where we were providing 12 prepaid scholarships for students within the city of Fort Lauderdale. It funded one year of college, or depending on what kind of school they were going to, there were also opportunities for more technical schools. And then the Municipal Services Affordability Program, this is really more of a water affordability program. So in the city of Fort Lauderdale, we operate our own water treatment plant, so we can't use HUD funds to fund if someone is economically challenged and unable to pay their water bill. We can't use HUD funds to pay ourselves to keep their water on. But what we're doing is leveraging the funds that we receive from HUD to handle the administrative components of running a program, so income verification and those types of activities. And then using these funds to help up to 300 families that would be at risk for having their municipal services or their water shut off.
This is important as we consider that rate increases are scheduled to hit this year, so we just wanted to be mindful that not every household is able to keep up.
So the next area, you heard presentations from the departments on these, so I'll go through fairly quickly. But the Office of Cultural Affairs, they're doing temporary and permanent art installations as well as programming associated with the arts. And then the Sailboat Bend Historic District, this is really more of a streetscape beautification plan intended to have a more cohesive design within that historic district, as well as the Hemmershey Historic District small scale streetscape activation. And again, the idea is to become more pedestrian friendly and an attractive environment in that area. There have been concerns with making sure that we're activating it in a way that allows for both nighttime and daytime economy in that area. And then finance will also be receiving 2 accountants. As the city grows, we also have to make sure that our internal services are able to support the activity that is occurring. And so this is the first time in years that we've actually added positions to finance specifically for accounting purposes. So it's a really good investment in making sure that we have strong internal controls as well as we're quickly processing the work that needs to occur.
Just want to ask a question on the Historic Sistrunk Neighborhood Welcome Mural. Where is that going?
So the exact location, and I think I have. It's like an over,
It's the 95 overpass.
there we go, the 95 overpass. And so it's still in the preliminary phases, but it's being run by our cultural affairs.
Are they gonna work with the community to see what they're putting up?
Absolutely, yeah. And then so in our fire department, one of the things that the chief is really championing is an officer development training program. So he spoke to you guys about it already. But the other thing that is occurring is an enhancement in equipment. So handheld sonar devices as well as cameras for fire investigation. These cameras really allow for the remote review of hazardous areas and really facilitate the quick sharing of information. And the sonar devices allow for the ability to accurately and quickly identify submerged location or individuals or objects. The thing that you heard from HR for the last 2 years was the class and comp study, and you've heard it from a lot of the departments too. Really, recruitment and retention has been a challenge with the city. And so the first step in making sure that we're well positioned is doing a class and comp study, which will evaluate, the compensation that we're providing to our employees. And then from a Parks and Recreation standpoint, you heard from Carl about the smart irrigation meters that they are intending to install. And really, this is a twofold initiative. It's beautification for making sure that we're able to maintain our medians, but it's also an environmental area and an economic one, because the idea here is that with these smart meters, we're only watering when water is actually needed in that area. So it reduces our water use while still maintaining the appropriate. Oh, yes, sorry. So this one's really exciting. So you're gonna hear a lot about it from the mayor especially. So the first part of that is the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. One of the big initiatives is celebrating that as a city. So rallying our neighbors around the celebration of that. This is a one-time cost because, 250th anniversary doesn't happen every year. But this is a one-time cost that's being coupled with existing programming that we already had for New Year celebration. And so the Parks team is working on what that looks like. The second one is the FIFA World Cup. So South Florida will be hosting the FIFA or games for the FIFA World Cup in the next fiscal year. And really, this is an opportunity. FIFA is an international event, so this is really an opportunity for us to step forward on the international stage to, showcase the city, the economic development, and also really we're part of something that is almost like the Super Bowl in the area. So, that's what
A little bigger than the Super Bowl.
a lot. I think the mayor, yeah, 7 times the Super Bowl. So, they're exciting events, but again, they're also one-time costs as we talk about long-term sustainability. These are one-time things that we're doing within the community that both, bring in economic development, brands our city, but also celebrate these really monumental occasions.
And just to add on FIFA, the intention is to leverage resources from Broward County and to partner with the FIFA host committee so that Fort Lauderdale can really be in the mix of all the excitement that's happening. We can showcase the city. It's a branding opportunity and a development opportunity. And we don't know the next time that the World Cup will have games here. So we just want to be a part of it and at the forefront.
What percentage of our money is being matched?
My understanding is that there's been a request to the county of about $1 million, if not more. I don't know that that has been finalized, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, because the county receives a lot of hotel food and beverage tax. Yeah. And we're the primary source. Hotels on the beach looking at international guests, yet we don't get our fair share of that. We hope they step up to the plate.
The next is the police department. So over the years, we've heard a lot about police departments over time. And really what we looked at for looking at this one, so this is really funding something that we've seen over the last few years, where because of the increased safety that's required associated with special events, we're incurring more and more overtime from the police department to staff these events. So this memorializes the enhanced funding to support those, and it looked at historic trends in order to determine the amounts. The other thing that's funded in here is funding for the maintenance and operation of the new police headquarters, as well as some technology investments. And this is a one-time contribution, again, as we talk about the difference between ongoing expenses. This one is more one-time, it's $1.6 million, and it focuses on being a force multiplier by providing closed circuit TV for some of those high traffic areas along the Himmershey Entertainment District, Las Olas, and Sistrunk corridor. And then the last thing, you heard the chief speak very passionately about the forensic specialist. So that is also something that is within this budget. And then for transportation and mobility, it's the traffic engineering, monitoring. It's a position that's really going to allow us to keep our finger to the pulse as it relates to providing traffic review services and monitoring services within the city. And so this is part of those positions that you've heard Milos talk about. So as we talk through the priorities, you guys have kind of nailed it already with focusing in on the city commission's priorities. But from a public safety standpoint, it's really three key areas. It's infrastructure, personnel, and equipment. So infrastructure, you've heard about the fire stations, you've heard about the police headquarters. Personnel is a really important one. So even though we have our sworn officers both in police and fire, they really are supported by IT professionals, by other professionals that really help them do their jobs. So the forensic specialists we've spoken about, but the IT positions are 7 IT positions to make sure that police and fire have the resources they need, the technology they need, and the support they need to be able to implement the initiatives that have really driven the way that they do business over the last few years. As we talk about equipment, there is a long list of equipment, and we also encourage you to look at the equipment replacement. By outlining how making sure year over year that we have the equipment in place to provide public safety. But we are also expanding our LPR license plate reader program. Vehicles for our public safety personnel, protective gear for our public safety personnel. All of those things are built into the. We've spoken about homelessness. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the initiatives that we're doing citywide, as well as some of the grant supported initiatives that we have. So it's not just general fund support, but really we use some of the resources that we receive, as well as the resources that we receive from the state through the SHIP program, to ensure that we're not only addressing homelessness, but we're also addressing the prevention of homelessness, which is really key in the city. So the public enjoyment of the waterways was one of the commission's priorities this year. And one of the things our city manager has talked a lot about is also how we're addressing the environment. So you hear a lot about that. Fort Lauderdale, that's the Venice of America. How are we making sure that our waterways are positioned to be enjoyed by all? So this is just a snapshot of some of those initiatives that we're doing. One of the things that you've heard from a commission standpoint would be the point source testing, which is funded in this budget, expanding our waterway quality testing and monitoring program. So all of those things are included in this budget. It's just a quick snapshot, and there's an exhibit 6, which details more about what we're doing on these areas. And then a few other commission priorities. So we talked a lot about our cultural initiatives this year. We're continuing the implementation of bonds, really advancing the way that we're moving those projects forward over the next year, as well as public space acquisition for dogs and parks. All of those things are funded in this budget, as well as bolstering a thriving community. So making sure that we're not just preparing for the things that are happening within municipal government, but also making sure that we're really positioning our community for success, which includes an economic revitalization study, some of our streetscape plans, and some of those other initiatives that we've already kind of touched on. So special events has been an area that has received some attention over the last few years. So we just wanted to provide you with a quick snapshot of the city's special events for the year. This year we'll have 33 special events, as well as the activation of Riverwalk in the Los Olas Oceanside Park. And this is a listing of all of those events. We kind of touched on the 2 new ones for the year, which are 2 one-time events for FIFA and the 200th anniversary of America. And so this is.
If you go back just one slide, I just want to emphasize that on the public safety element of these special events attributed to overtime, we thought it wasn't necessarily as transparent or as clear as possible when we look at police overtime expenditures if we're not isolating those related to the special events that the city produces or sponsors or is part of. So we just wanted to make sure we outline where that fit into the whole puzzle of special event costs, so that we're not always hammering police on overtime expenditures without considering how they participate in special events in the city.
The 250th anniversary, is that going to be downtown, was that for the mayor to talk about? Maybe doing a big event out in the dog park?
I think on a preliminary basis, we had heard a request come for Lockhart to be a part of that activation, but I think it remains to be seen as we go through the planning phase.
This question, downtown. Each year that's grown downtown, I think it's kind of, it's really at its point, it can't grow much more, can it? And that's true. Just true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, obviously, like, we can take on, you know, if there's planning and notification, I think is the main thing for downtown residents, is just, if they know the streets are gonna be closed, or if there's gonna be, you know, something to inhibit them in any way, they just want advance notice. I don't think that we have the same kind of, things, sometimes to get at the beach yet. Just as far as, you know,
Well, but I see this as a major, big increase this coming year with that. I would think maybe perhaps Lockhart would be.
I think that's the intent, and we just have to get all the details in order.
Say Lockhart? Stadium.
Oh, we're in Miami, please, up in District 1. I still call it Joe Robbie.
I still call it
So we also wanted to showcase some of the CIP initiatives that are being funded this year. This is- did something change? Okay, there we go. There you go. So we wanted to highlight some of the CIP initiatives. So the things that you're accustomed to seeing year over year are built in some cases enhanced. So we're still focusing on streets, roadways, sidewalks, bridges. This year, we're also adding funding in for some of our new solar panel initiatives, which we're going to start out. So all of those things that you're accustomed to seeing are in there. We talked a lot about the fire stations already. One of the projects that is being advanced is the Breakers Avenue and Birch Road improvements. So we received some grant funding for this project, but it really needed those last dollars to fully complete the project. And so those are also envisioned in this budget, as well as our seawall restoration program, seawall repair and restoration program. So that is awesome.
Where is that happening?
For seawalls. So it's an ongoing initiative. So each year, there was a study that was completed that really targeted which seawalls were being breached the most. And so the Public Works team is working through those seawalls based on the priorities that were identified in the report. You'll notice in some of the future years that there are actually specific seawalls that are identified. So it's a two-pronged approach. Some of it is the repair of existing seawalls. Some need to be replaced, and so that is being programmed out as well.
And for that 1.5 million, you're looking to get 2 seawalls. That's awesome. Replacements would be increased. Is there any, I see you mentioned Breakers, is there anything for the Sunset maintenance?
Sunrise.
For Sunrise.
So that is not included in the program CIP.
And I think this would not be CIP, but I know that, but I'm not sure, did Public Works, get money for the elevated road replacement this year?
So that is not included.
It is not, it was not even speaking.
So this is just a snapshot of some of the future year projects, so some of the things that are coming down the road. And we just wanted to make sure that you all saw bridge restoration and bridge replacement is something that continues to be a really big financial investment that the city is making. So you'll notice a number of those, as well as some traffic safety improvements, street improvements. All of those things are included in future years.
Yeah, I did the, so the allocation, I see there for Las Vegas Lagoon. is 1 million. So that's more, maybe could you talk a little bit more about maybe, I guess that's a hot topic for folks on what to expect and when, and I guess it looks like we're gonna be continuing to be doing some research due diligence. Is that in the next couple of years? Is that?
I'm gonna turn it over to
Okay,
Mila.
Milos.
Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you, Milos, I'm Restorative Acting Director for City Transportation Mobility. So right now, we have a consultant for developing design plans for Las Olas Mobility, both Western Corridor and Eastern Corridor. The cost associated with those two design efforts is about 8.4 plus another $2 million, about 5.4, so there's remaining $1 million to actually write. There's some, we are on the lookout for any grant opportunities that we can leverage to advance any construction efforts. Most recently, we were lucky to secure some funding to do really the resurfacing of a portion of Las Olas corridor. So we don't underestimate those small improvements, but when it comes to the plan for construction of Las Olas after design is completed, which design will be completed within the next year or so, it is about $150 million between Western Corridor and Eastern Corridor. So we'll be on the lookout for any grant opportunities, any appropriations that we can get, any surtax funding that we can leverage in the future and whatnot. But what we have for construction right now is really $1 million.
Okay, all right, thank you.
We talked a little earlier about our replacement plans. So we do them for public safety, IT, Parks and Rec. And really the idea here is once we start investing in equipment, we want to make sure that we are always prepared for when we need to replace it. So we do equipment replacement plans for everything from the laptops that aren't being used to the wave runners that are used by the fire rescue team. Also the vests for our police department and even the animals that they work with. So again, we want to make sure that we're not just investing in one-time related items, that we're preparing for the continuous replacement and continuously equipping the staff with what they need to do their jobs. And the last one, the city manager has already talked on, but it's the PFAS settlement. Really, it's gonna be $24.5 million flowing through 2033. And the bulk of that money is coming in year 1 and year 2. So $14.3 million scheduled for 2025, and then 4.8 for 2026. And this is really what we're using to jumpstart the emergency reserve initiative. Without really burdening the taxpayers associated with that. So with that, are there any questions?
Great job.
Delicious, sweet balance, but
Yeah.
it won't make everyone happy. We're still addressing the infrastructure and hitting the high marks. Commissions.
Can I make a comment also when you guys talk about this is the last time I've ever criticized 501c3 funding. We're about to spend $400,000 on homelessness initiatives by giving it to other institutions. We should probably look at that funding. There's plenty of 501c3s around, so we're gonna fund anything. We should look at the problems in the city. That's one of our problems. It's not the arms. Just my state.
I just have one quick question. I know that you guys did a big proposal. I saw it in the exhibits about the business tax. Is that still planned for this budget?
Yeah, so it's actually item 3 on the agenda. The BAB asked for some information related to some of our revenues, and business tax was one of those that were included. There is not anything planned in the budget right now for an increase in that. But we wanted to provide you with this information in the event that the BAB wanted to weigh in on any of those items. This was kind of some background to allow you to have that.
I think that was one of the ones that I asked in the revenue report for increase.
And let's share with the elected officials that we'd like to bring that discussion back to them, and make a decision to streamline the categories for business tax, but not to increase the fees. And I think we should have a second look, and hopefully that's something that's fast.
There's a twofold piece of this too with the business tax, because I get you have businesses that are generating a lot of revenue here, but I don't know about other districts, but in our district, the retail is really struggling. This year was one of the toughest years. And I know that some areas downtown have had some problems filling the retail space and stuff, so I want you to consider that as too, because we're losing retailers in Fort Lauderdale, and that, I think that's a unique thing that I loved about Fort Lauderdale. We don't have a lot of big box stores, we have a lot of local businesses that do retail and sales here. And they're leaving Fort Lauderdale and they're struggling. So I when we look at the business tax, I think we need to really consider the retail in Fort Lauderdale, because I think we need to protect that. And I know in our district, we have about 80 businesses, and this has been the worst year they've had. There's just the people that typically come here are not coming here. And so I've heard the same with Las Olas. Las Olas is going to a lot of commercial stores that have a lot more support. So we're losing those local small retail spaces. So I really wanna see how we can, in this plan, protect some of that.
Well, maybe there could be, levels.
Yeah.
Certain size levels, but and to your point, I don't know how much the business tax is gonna keep you in business.
Right, it's
I mean, the rent's ridiculous, insurance is, if you own your property, ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
I hear what you're saying.
but it's interesting, I mean, with our association, our fees are very nominal. And I have businesses spreading out like $500 annual dues over the entire year.
Oh, because they can.
Yeah, and it's just, so I just know that personally from, and I'm just speaking of small retail, locally owned retail. They're the ones that are they're really experiencing challenges, and I know like Oakland Park's welcoming them because they're growing the small businesses in their little districts, so they may be doing something different than we are. I don't know, so that's something to think about.
Chair, I don't know if you'd allow our acting director of development services to chime in, but I don't think it's a one size fits all when it comes to business tax. And I think we're seeing a lot of commercial rents going up locally. So I think that's probably impacting the market and retail in general.
That's great. For resale.
Do you know if like Oakland Park and Pompano, who are bringing a lot of small businesses, though they have those new little business districts like that are popping up, they're getting a lot of retail, local retail. Are those cities doing anything to incentivize the small retail businesses to come here? Because I see the trend of the businesses going to Oakland Park and to Pompano, and so.
Respectfully, Oakland Park and Pompano are way different than Fort Lauderdale.
Correct, but
Property values are way different, so the owners just can't get cheap rent.
I would assume that, but Pompano's getting up, I mean, there's,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to just to be aware if there are other things,
I would like to know
I
that.
think this supports our request for chief economic development officer.
Correct.
Dive into this.
Yeah.
Come up with strategy.
There you go.
That give a little bit of jump start.
And a domino effect of all this too is if we don't maintain or improve the infrastructure, the streetscapes of some of these old small pocket business districts, such as Sunset Lane, then you're going to get t-shirt shops or vapes, vape for some vape stores, wherever the market will allow to the developer, the owner to attract to get revenues. So that's why I think it's important that we're seeing breakers, we're seeing success of Blackbird Village, some of these small little neighborhood village concepts support.
And that's where the smaller businesses are gonna.
And that get higher end to attract. So I would encourage to relook at since late appreciative.
Just, I mean, anecdotally, just doing it day to day, if it's the main corridor of Fort Lauderdale is a lot more expensive than the main corridors, even east, and that's usually what happens with clients and tenants is rent's sort of the number one thing, they might want to hear, of course, not services different. And if it's a newer project like the Flywheel Road, it's when they underwrite those developments, they're underwriting pretty aggressive rents, typically retail, whether it's so it's new building, it's just tough. And sometimes they just leave it vacant, you don't want either, but I'd say rent is usually the number one driving factor, so if you're saying they're going to go for Pompano. The areas are getting nicer, the rents are not what they are if you're trying to be on the beach or you're trying to be right here in Pasos.
You see this too, you get large organizations, corporations buying on the spot.
Yeah, thank you.
I just tried to, and I feel like put a tenant that was a local business owner in a shopping center that was recently bought by a different client of mine who's a REIT, and it's been sitting vacant for 2 years, and she doesn't understand why they don't fit into it, I said they just don't care. There's it works the business plan that they want credit, and a lot of them want credit to then get these, I don't get to the weeds, then they want to get their property and sell it on. It's easier to sell a property with the main brand tenant than it is with the local tenant.
I know that like some cities, I don't know if it's even a possibility for the notoriously vacant retail spaces, because they do, so we have them in our neighborhood, they're taking the incentives. Are there anything the cities can do to curb that? I know some cities have implemented penalties for long-term vacancies and things like that, but I don't know if that's gonna help with the rent increase and all the, we have unique costs down here, but I don't know if we've ever explored that because that could
Is
be
there
a
anywhere
challenge.
specific you're thinking about?
What's that?
Is there anywhere specific you're thinking about?
I think downtown has a lot of, downtown has a lot of vacant retail. I think Flagler, our neighborhood does, the North Beach, some of the beach areas, I think it's okay, but yeah.
I'll let the city chime in, but it would probably behoove us to have relationships, and I think that we do, and our community's pretty close knit with the local developers and people who own most of the areas down here. It helps to have those conversations of whether they're being picky, whether it's a REIT from New York, or whether it's a local person that says, I've been trying to get a restaurant in here for a year and I can't. So there's a lot of different scenarios, and it's not always a one size fits all of why something's been vacant for a while.
And I think too, though, I mean, part of, I think what I found out at a DDA, I think some of us were there. One of the things that they mentioned there is that in some of these other communities, say just a little bit north of us, a lot of the retail buildings are newer.
Yeah.
So some businesses would actually prefer to be up there because the infrastructure is newer. And there's more amenities for businesses and buildings they're going into. So that's another factor that's coming into play in a city where we are new, but we also have the old, and a lot of our commercial and business district doesn't probably measure up to like the newness of some of those areas just north of us. So that doesn't have an impact on where businesses choose to go. And I think, and that's just information we received, I guess, actually, because it was from Colliers, when we were at a DDA.
And just for background, we're not permitted to fine because you're vacant.
Yeah.
So it's,
Right.
there's technically nothing illegal about having a vacant space remain vacant as long as it's being kept up from a code perspective. But I think one of the areas that we should look into are business improvement districts for our commercial corridors, where the property owners assess themselves and really market the corridor and try to activate it so that it draws in that foot traffic and that they're all invested on another level in terms of making it successful. So.
One thing I'd like to add into is, I think we need to work with our businesses, and parking is a big issue. And I think when we have businesses that are doing better, or we need to make sure the parking is available. It just seems like sometimes the city might be not contacting the business and just kind of doing something, and it creates a big problem for your customers who are trying to come in. So, I know where we are, there's a lot of vacant property, there's a lot of things that maybe people don't want in their neighborhoods, but it just seems like when we bring in things that people want, sometimes it seems like, people do things and then it's like, there's no notice, it's just done, and we have to call everybody to try to get it resolved. And I think there's better ways to do that if we want to keep businesses in every corner.
I will say we've been working with transportation and mobility. They've been extremely helpful for our businesses and coming up with some new plans for parking and things like that too. So I think reaching out, I think the city's resources here sometimes is finding the right contacts and saying, hey, this is some of our challenges. How can you help us? And I've experienced in every area of the city's really willing to help. We just gotta make that ask.
So we actually did, share that on this past Monday with the CRA to discuss parking options along the corridor. And so we will giving that initiative that work with the CRA and community and parking.
But I'm just saying that part of that has to be, you know, when you have existing parking, that we talk about what we're gonna do with that before we just summarily do something. It's, you know, today's business day and, oh, parking's gone.
Are you ready to move on to revenue?
So usually at this point in the meeting, the budget advisory board will weigh in on things like whether or not the millage or,
Bring it up on
Okay.
communication.
oh, okay.
Workshop, but we can do that now. As you know, we have a joint workshop next week. And 3 areas that we need to have a discussion on, and verbally motions on, so that we go in, staff and city manager, she presents the budget, that we have the opportunity as staff to weigh in on. And that is the fire assessment fee. We support the increase. We support as proposed preliminary budget with no increase. Do we feel there should be a need for an increase? And then the third thing is the emergency management fund that's being established, 4.8. My personal opinion is that needs to be codified in an ordinance with parameters so that we don't have what happened in the past where you have money sitting in a fund and they come and raid that money.
Oh, let's ask about that. I mean, I'm sure, we're hoping that there's some type of rules with that fund. Is it like a reserve where it can't be touched for anything else, or can the city just use it whenever they want?
Definitely want to gauge whether or not our elected officials would support such a fund. We think that it'll be a valuable resource, especially with the uncertainty that we're seeing around emergency management and yes, I do think we will need to establish some guardrails and some guidance for use of the funds. And I would be supportive of having that discussion with the BAP and also with the commission. At this point, we don't know if they are
Can I ask a dumb question maybe? When, like, I look at thing like FEMA, which I don't know a lot about, but I look at other organizations, federal governments, and they come in and they say, oh, you have money, spend that first,
Exactly.
and then we'll give you money. So I wanna make sure that we're not setting it up that that's a free money there, that if we need it, do we need to put it somewhere else? And that's something you may already thought about, but I just.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So historically, the way that our FEMA requests have worked is they look at the total expenses that we incurred that are considered allowable under headings that they have.
Okay.
And then they reimburse a certain percentage. So historically, it's been 75%. And then the city and the state have historically split the remaining 25%.
Okay.
And so it hasn't been about whether or not your community has the resources to respond. It's really been more about whether or not you meet the criteria for federal response.
Okay, that's great, cause I love the idea of it, and that prevention piece is really important. I always think about that. It's like they come in, you have the money, we'll spend that first.
And there's federal thresholds on dollar amounts, you have to reach that point first.
Yeah.
Before they get any federal assistance, and with the new direction of president, as of yesterday, his plan is to dissolve FEMA by the end of this hurricane season and throw response and recovery back on state and local jurisdictions. So this would help alleviate that by having a reserve fund that would be for response and recovery. Not as much as for mitigation and planning, but for flooding, hazmat situations, hurricanes, things of that nature.
I think it's an excellent idea. I think too, we may have to think about funding this ongoing, throughout the
Well, that's
year.
the question. Now, if we're gonna put $4 or $5 million in there, what if we use it this year? Are we looking to re-up it? Are we making it an annual thing, and why can't we just start with $1 million, just put $1 million a year?
Here, wanna look at balance of that fund and supplement. I think we'll figure out trends as we go along. Right now, this is a new thing, and I think that starting at 4.8 still is very conservative. We can blow through
Right,
four
so
point
it's not a lot of money.
eight. So if FEMA is moving in the direction of putting it on the state, and we don't know how the state is gonna respond either, I think we need to start.
And if you notice that 4.8 is equivalent to the settlement.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, put it in there like a millionaire if you make someone else.
Be great.
My opinion.
Well, but we need to weigh in.
I think with parameters, it's a smart thing. Why wouldn't we have some type of emergency fund? I mean, we have $1 billion budget, what's $4 or $5 million? Like, if we run into a problem, we can just straight it somewhere, right? We've done that for 100 years. So it's not a bad idea, it's fiscally responsible, but should we do that? Need to do that?
I think it's something that's trending. We've seen it in other municipalities and other states, and Yvette, I know you participate in a lot of conferences, and it's something that folks are doing these days, and I felt like this is the right time, the right moment because of everything that we're seeing and the circumstances surrounding emergency management.
So
I'd like to know how we're gonna keep it there. We're gonna create it, how are we gonna keep it there?
that's why we haven't, that's why we could recommend that they do an ordinance. It has to have two readings, but we suggest those parameters or those guardrails.
For spending, but also funding. Guardrails for spending, but also for funding.
But we have reserve policies now that are in place and targets.
But is this a reserve?
So it is a reserve.
What is a reserve?
Yeah,
Yeah.
reserve.
Yeah.
And so we could set thresholds and targets for this reserve, just like we do normally.
And I should know this, but refresher on the other reserve funds, this one the monies would be invested in a similar fashion by staff. Or, it wouldn't be going to the financial advisor, or would it?
So right now, we have a financial advisor that manages our investments, so
Okay.
it would be managed in the same.
It would be the same as the other reserve fund.
Shouldn't that be in
Okay.
cash? If it's an emergency fund?
The city, they put in over about $300 for now, investment. So it's in an investment pool like the other liquid reserves we have,
So it's liquid.
yes.
So is it the recommendation of the FAB that we recommend in support the establishment of the
Reserve fund.
emergency management reserve fund, and that it be it crafted into a city ordinance with parameters of the spending, the use.
And annual funding.
The annual funding of that fund.
If we're gonna put a reserve fund, we should fund it annually.
Is that a motion?
A chair can't make a motion.
I'll make a motion to communicate with the commission that we're in favor of establishing this fund, so long as there's guidelines for funding and for spending.
Okay. I have a question. What do you think about doing this, and will it in any way hamper our ability to use other funds if we need to? If we have a major emergency, or will we be only using this emergency fund?
Would not limit us to be able to access our other reserve funds if we exhausted the emergency management reserve. God willing, that doesn't happen, but yes, having more in reserve is always an opportunity to give us flexibility. But we would look to the emergency management reserve in cases of emergency, and if that was exhausted, we would move on to the other reserve funds. Yeah.
Do you know on average how much we spend a year on emergency situations?
So I pulled the information from Earmer and we spent, the city general fund spent $3.6 million that year. This was in 2017, so that was our last major hurricane. And the state provided the same 3.6 because they usually match what our contribution is. FEMA provided about $24 million that time, so that was our initial estimates of what we'd be receiving. So as the manager mentioned, as we look at changes that are occurring in FEMA, those numbers, the city's responsibility could increase significantly.
And that was 8 years ago, so
Yeah.
it cost them $5. Yeah.
I'd like to see that, I'd like to see a $20 million fund sitting there, you know? That's what we spend and we need it.
Wait 5 years is there.
Sharon, your experience have the,
Baby steps.
and with the ordinance, for example, I mean, the details would have to be worked out. For example, would the funds only be available if the mayor has declared a state of emergency, or would that be necessary? I guess those types of things would have to be worked out or. But generally,
Yeah.
when we use reserves or is the state of emergency being announced kind of a threshold that generally is best practice, or is it not really necessary to have it?
I think cities normally trigger a state of emergency to be able to access those emergency dollars from
Right.
FEMA or from the state and be able to access assets and resources. So I don't imagine that we would have an emergency situation that we did not do a declaration.
That they're
for, but that could be contemplated as part of the forthcoming ordinance.
So emergencies, would it be, are you speaking specifically for storms? Or if we get a major pipe burst? Could be anything.
Yeah.
So-
Pandemic was a state of
The
emergency.
city, when we were having those pipes burst a few years ago, did we declare a state of emergency in the city? Right, those are emergency situations, we didn't declare a state of emergency, so I don't think that that needs to happen. I think that it would be whoever has access to that account or those accounts and follow the rules of what we set forward. I don't think a state of emergency needs to be called.
Well, I don't
Yeah,
know, I
that's-
mean, like she said, though, normally when you're trying to get funds, a state of emergency has to be
That's not-
declared.
Not internal.
But not internal, but if you're trying to get state funds too. Because then if you're gonna have it matched, you know, the state and FEMA wasn't, if it does. If FEMA, I don't know, that's what I.
Define qualifying events.
Yeah.
And try to mirror as much as possible the protocols that we've used in terms of FEMA. And I think we have an opportunity to mirror some of what we've utilized as rules and guidelines in the past, but this is uncharted territory that we're entering into, so I think we need a little bit of flexibility here.
Yeah.
And you could consider in the drafting of the ordinance that when an emergency is declared by the mayor, that then that allows access to use those funds as needed during the emergency.
Then we need a state of emergency.
Are we getting too much in the weeds?
Yeah.
Right now, it's like.
I'm just saying, if you're looking for ideas, that's.
Yeah.
Okay,
So maybe they'll come back to you guys next year and they'll ask if you're.
Kind of like they did the
Yeah.
profits.
So do I have to change my motion or can we keep it on the table? It's still-
We need to repeat what I think you
Sorry?
I really need to repeat that.
Sure. And everything Ms. Raquel said as well, just put it in there.
Motion made by Ross Camerata that the BAB recommends the creation of the emergency reserve fund as long as there are parameters for funding and expenditures from the fund.
No further discussion, I'll do a roll call vote. If we have to do a roll call vote for the ethics training on it.
Okay.
Ms. Bills? Yes.
Ms. Belker? Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Maybe, yeah, you're here?
He's sleeping.
Mr. Camerata?
Yes.
Mr. DeGirolamo?
Yes.
Ms. Joe Smith? Yes. And Trevor?
Yes. Okay, beautiful. The next item, need to discuss is the fire assessment fee as proposed. City manager, what is the feel of the map?
I like it.
I do too.
I'm in support.
So there's a motion to support the city manager's recommendation on the Shall I make
the motion? That the city manager's recommendation of the increase, I believe, of $75. That the BAP support that inclusion in
Is
the
that
budget.
maximum recovery?
Seconded.
It's full cost.
Full cost, yeah.
A roll call vote?
Mr. Bills?
Yes.
Ms. Falconer?
Yes.
Mr. Camerata?
Yes.
Mr. DeGirolamo?
Yes.
Ms. Joe Smith?
Yes.
And Trevor?
Yes.
6.
Okay. The next discussion is the millage rate MR. What is, as the city manager has proposed no increase this year for the 19th year. What is the thoughts of that?
We could not fund it and decrease it. Not fund your project, decrease it. By a basis point or two. Your emergency fund will just take about 2% a decrease.
One-time revenue.
Oh, okay.
Please remember.
I move that we support city manager's recommendation.
I'll second that.
Mr. Bills?
Yes.
Ms. Falconer?
Yes.
Mr. Camerata?
Yes.
Mr. DeGirolamo?
Yes.
Ms. Joe Smith?
Yes.
And Trevor?
Yes.
18 years.
Are there any other items of discussion before we go on to the agenda that person Bab thinks bring up or have brought up?
Just want to say thank you to staff and to the
Yeah, thank
manager.
you.
Did an excellent job.
Yeah. One of the best presentations I've seen so far.
Likewise, we
I
want
like
to thank
this.
you for
It's awesome.
taking the time to help us through the process, and you have more to go.
Okay. Jump back into the general revenue. Revenue follow up.
Yeah, so, the BAD requested some information on some of the revenues that were reviewed by, Roth and the rec, and some additional background on those revenues. So one of our amazing analysts, Tamika McGibbon, put together this packet for you all. Yes, Tamika, thank you. During budget season, put together this packet, which really explains some rate history, some benchmarking against our neighboring municipalities, and then the financial impact of raising the rate. This is really more just to be a discussion point for you all. If there's any more information that you would like us to look at, we are open to doing that. One of the other things that this includes is a listing of our active lease agreements. That was another question that came up because our leases do generate revenue for the city. We provided 2 different snapshots, really 3. The first snapshot is spaces that the city leases. And one of the things I didn't know before working for the city was the city also leases the air rights to certain locations. So you'll see those air right leases included in this document. It also includes, while not a general fund revenue and not revenue that the general fund can tap into, because we wanted to make sure that we were providing some additional information, we provided the FETC leases. FETC has done an amazing job over the last few years as they're renewing leases, making sure that they're really building the very CPI to enhance revenue. So if you had asked us maybe 5 years ago, we were worried about where FETC would be when the general fund stopped supporting them through the payback for the purchase of a piece of land. Now, because they've been building those escalators into their contracts, we are no longer concerned about FETC improving students at all. And then the last segment that is provided is an update on some of the non-generating, revenue generating leases that the city has. And we just wanted to make sure we were being fully transparent about some of the spaces that we do provide to the school board or nonprofits, where we're really generating $1 or $5 a year. But it was based on the commission priority to ensure that we were supporting these workers.
Sure.
So, it's just a couple of some summary information as you all go through, and if there's anything that you would like us to do a deeper dive in, we're happy to provide that information. But we just wanted to make sure that you are aware that staff is doing this research as we move through the budget process. We are looking at our revenue. Our city manager has really tasked us with not only looking at our existing revenues, but also looking at where we can have revenue. So that's something that we plan on working on over the next year, so that when we bring the next budget to you all, you can really see the fruits of that labor.
Thank you.
Yes, do we as a BAB, we need to weigh in any of these rate increases to the commission, or
If you would like to weigh in on business tax, I know you all have discussed it internally from both standpoints. If you would like to weigh in and, use the information that's provided as your stepping stone for your weighing in, that's part of the reason we provided this information, so it can inform this discussion.
Real quick, what was the project that the Ann Storage Center, I guess it is, that was a project we built, we used in that. In 2020, it looks like there's a house center for $1 That's just significant, the piece of building, I just don't know that.
In terms of crisis, isn't it?
They have a million
Oh,
square
I'm
foot
sorry,
building
the
out
Ann
in
Storage
Davie,
Center?
Yeah, it's
for Davie area.
the crisis health center.
I'm not quite certain, but I will Google it very quickly and give
It's
you
I looked at it on my phone.
Oh, okay.
Whether we own that or was it a significant building.
so, Ross?
Yeah.
So our representative. What's your thoughts on these increases? Should we weigh in?
I gotta be completely frank with you and say that I have not reviewed this. I didn't see this, this is the first time I'm looking at this. I'm not to say that I didn't have it for 2 weeks now, possibly did.
It's okay. I know we send you guys a lot of stuff, so
I apologize.
no.
I am for all increases across the board. As I said in my report, I think that, having these nominal, everyone says, well, what's $1 gonna do? What's $15 gonna do? Well, it's a lot. And we're bringing in $10 million just on the fire assessment fee for $75 increase. So we look across the board, I see revenues that have not worked, or charges, fees that haven't been changed in 10+ years. It just doesn't make sense to me. So, I talked about increasing the athletic fees. I mean, do we really want to charge them more to use the fields? No, but we need to find places for revenue. We're in a beautiful city and a lot of this stuff is inexpensive, which is okay, but I'm gonna blanket say everything that I said before, looking over the revenues, I'm okay with increases across the board.
But not Main Street.
Yeah.
No, listen, I've been an advocate for raising the village for 5 years now.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. And in fact, if we do get into that, then we'll have more money to fund an emergency fund and not have to, clamor at the end of the year, wait for real estate to be up 8% or 10%. So, yeah, everyone that I recommended when I came here from the revenue estimating committee, I recommend that we look into an increase.
I'm looking at, I think, when I look at it too, I would, the only thing I disagree with is the retail space, like bringing small businesses here, as we already talked about. I also think the sports and activity fees for kids, it helps them to stay off the streets and stay out of trouble. Sports is a good
That
thing.
eliminate the fee completely.
That's, yeah, so I just,
Then we should do it for free, because it doesn't bring in a lot of money.
Right. right, so it's, I wouldn't say eliminate it, but I would say, consider that, that is a huge asset to our youth. To keep them active and out of trouble, so.
That's all.
The business tax. If you were to make a motion, could it include that we would do a more conservative increase on retail?
I wouldn't even say retail, maybe just, I don't know if this is even possible, but locally owned space, retail that's small business. I don't know how you would do that, or if you could do that, if that's too complicated. Yes. Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
us increasing the tax on the business side doesn't affect the owner of the property.
right,
They don't care.
right.
Owner operator might be something else.
One thing that I know Portia's probably going to mention is that the most we can increase it is 5% every other year. So The amount, given that the amount that she shared was what, for retail?
$157.50 for retail, and the increase, one of the models showed a 1.5% increase over 9 years, which was less than $1 million. It was around $7 million.
Like I said, I'm just speaking from experience of I represent probably 60 small businesses, and every one of them is struggling right now. And I don't know if that's just our neighborhood or if it's other neighborhoods as well, but we're just, it's like they're barely keeping their head above water, and I'm the one collecting the dues for the association, so I have to go get the money for the association, so I know that personally, that, you know, it is a struggle, even a couple $100 for some businesses who are barely getting by right now. And anybody who's run a small business knows you don't pay yourself, you don't pay your retirement, you forego a lot of things to do this community contribution, and that's my, you know, like, I know it's very small piece, so I don't want to belabor it and get the details, but
$8 increase.
yeah, so I would feel amiss if I didn't say it on behalf of the businesses.
We do our
No,
optional 5%, up to 5%.
so it was presented to the city commission and they opted not to raise
So
it.
they did not raise it last year.
Okay, so this,
Yeah,
So so they haven't raised the business tax receipt rate in quite a while. And thank you.
So I'm hearing there's a desire for conservative approach. You know, looking at for lean history research, we know employee salaries cost, benefits, it takes time. I think that's a justifiable increase. The cost of emergency medicine, transport, arena, cost of drugs, cardiac drugs, cost of equipment is going up. And looking at that comparison study, which was done amongst all municipalities in 2017, I think it's justifiable.
I think all EMS, fire, all those public safety, I think those are all 100% justifiable without even.
And that's what they're,
Yeah.
It's not like tax, they're billing the insurance company, Medicare, or Medicaid, rates largest, fire services. So, is there a desire to move forward with the recommendation that the BAB supports the revenue review report, presented the budget advisory and recommendations?
Can I make a motion? I make a motion supporting all the recommendations that were put forward us for the chair of the rec to increase fees across the board. Conservatively in some areas, that's up to the elected officials, I guess, right? I think it's our job to try and find some places for revenue.
he presented. And it's to recommend supporting his recommendation, communicating his recommendation to the city commission.
Sorry, I just want to understand.
No, I think I'm being asked to make a motion to support the budget, the increases across the board were recommended by rec.
Is that this or is that something else?
Just to clarify, this is just a review, a landscape review, I
Yeah.
guess is the
Yeah.
best
Was it
way
in?
to say it.
Uh-huh.
So there aren't specific recommendations, other than I think fire was indicating that they were already in the process of increasing some of their rates. There's no specific recommendation in this document, it was just.
FYI.
Oh, okay, just the
Yeah.
information,
Hey.
study.
But Ross is correct, the places that we benchmarked or shared the benchmarking for are the places that the rec was reviewing and had questions about whether or not we had increased rates. So that's how these specific revenues were selected, because the rec had some concerns about how long it had been since we had increased rates. But this does not include a specific recommendation.
No, but.
So
we're
this
not gonna
doesn't-
do a motion. We're supporting those.
Yes.
Review.
Yeah.
And encourage the commission to.
What's the rec review?
So rec,
A couple meetings ago,
yeah, so.
revenue estimating committee.
At the Revenue Estimating Conference Committee, their request for staff was also to look at business tax, development reviews, review fees, business permit fees, also the fire ambulance transport fees and the lean research fees and some general parks and rec related fees. So this includes that information. One of the things that it includes Parks and Recs, fees, like the landscape fees. It sounds like that's not an area that has a consensus. But if the other.
Real estate's a whole nother thing I'd like to have a conversation about.
I guess I don't know, maybe Ross, you can clarify, the committee may just go apart from looking at these specific areas and asking for information. Did the committee, come to a consensus on the increases in these areas?
No, so what the job of the revenue estimate is to go over each department and all of their expenses and revenues and find that and make recommendations, bring back recommendations to the BAB regarding the reports that we read and I noticed that on a number I gave a report. I don't know if you can pull that report up. It's a I tried to find it, I couldn't find it.
Yeah, and
It's a full report on every one that I thought was an opportunity to increase fees.
And one of the key reasons that we have the Revenue Estimating Conference Committee is really to provide a recommendation on how much we should budget in the current year for these revenues. As a part of that, they also do review some of the history associated with the revenue and provide feedback on some of that information. But their primary focus is to ensure that we're getting, it's a member of the Audit Advisory Board, a member of the Budget Advisory Board, member of
Estimating
the
the revenue for each department.
yeah, of the finance department and OMB that are estimating revenues that are not dictated by a third party. So they're not estimating our property value, right? But they're estimating those revenues that you see in front of you that are not dictated by a third party that the city has to lose.
And do we have, and I know you did your report, I do remember, like, you brought a lot of information, but I'm just curious, given who represents the rec, do we have the minutes from the meeting and what, like, was there actually items voted on to increase by the rec?
No,
So there was no formal vote by the rec?
no, there's formal votes by the rec, but it's not to increase fees, it's to accept the budget for each department and each particular section of that department.
And so what did the voting, what was the outcome?
The outcome of the vote was the amount of money that we estimate will be the revenue for that particular department.
So essentially, it sounds like they accepted the status, what you've presented with as far as the budget, the business revenues that are already in the budget.
Yes,
Yes.
So that would not be increases.
correct.
Chair, if I may interject, one of the pieces in the preliminary budget that the manager provided us an overview was that over the next year, we really do want to dig into this with you. So if there's one in particular you would like included in the budget, maybe make a recommendation on that, or over the next year, we'll work with you on creating those recommendations. I'm not sure that this will be part of the 2026 budget, but I think, there's definitely some movement with our new city manager tasking us with looking at this and the revenue estimating committee, also paying some attention. So we could delay this conversation and have some more in-depth work with you all. I think that may be more meaningful.
Yeah, we met
Open.
end of March, beginning of April. And when I brought that back, which following week, this is there's no, I don't have, nor would any of us have a record, unless there's something in this packet right here, which I've already tested, I haven't read, that gives us specific numbers to say, let's go with that one. So all I can tell you is that there's plenty of areas, I think, that we can increase fees. I don't know what dollars and cents. I think that's just part of this, and there's even.
So the only, sorry.
If there's
Go
a
ahead.
strong desire to take action on some of the discussions that both the FAB, I think that staff would be open to incorporation into the fiscal year 26 budget, but I think the entirety of the list hasn't been fully vetted and we haven't had a thorough discussion. But from my perspective, if you were more interested in the business tax, because this is something that staff has discussed in the past, we brought information forward. It's something that we have an estimate around. I would be comfortable with going in that direction and not necessarily waiting a whole year for that discussion to,
Yeah.
to.
The ambulance, mileage rate fees.
So the ambulance fees are already going to come back. The fire department recently completed a study, and so they are working through what those increases will be. I think they provided some backup in this presentation as an exhibit. But the business tax is one where the amount is already capped by the state, so 5% is the absolute max you could do. We've already done all the estimates on what the revenue looks like associated with that. And we know what the impacts would be to, you know, the average business owner, specifically for retail, it looks like it's about $8 a year of an increase. So all of that information, specifically the business tax, because we had already considered increasing it in the past, we do have all of that information included in the packet.
Would we have to vote on that today, or could we come to the next meeting to
You
discuss it?
do not have to vote on it today.
Just to give us a chance to review it.
Yeah, if you all want to review it, it was just a request that came from the Budget Advisory Board to actually have some more information about these areas, so we didn't want to delay providing that information. But how you navigate the discussion, I think you all wanted to begin a discussion.
Yes.
So let's do this. The motion, and I believe it got seconded. You have a motion pulled.
Who did this?
I don't think it was second.
So it dies a lack of
Yeah.
second. Let's have staff, could you place it on somewhere on the agenda? On a work plan to have, I think we need to have a serious discussion.
Well, you need my notes.
Yes.
So,
And will we
can
distribute your note? Yeah.
You will distribute them?
Yeah. And because some of these will take time to implement, if desire of the commission is to do the increases by the time you get with city legal and change. Just so that we have everything in place perhaps for the next budget cycle.
Just don't drop it, because there's some money there.
And I think too, Norbert brought up a good point that we don't stifle, you know, businesses that are barely hanging on, because like you said, a lot of people are.
In that particular, I think it's like $8 a year. Again, it's $8, but if we have 20,000 businesses. Yeah. Starts to grow.
The costs are going up.
Yeah, they are everywhere.
I know, but I think he brings up a good point. People are struggling. I don't see it getting any better. Hopefully it gets better, but with the amount of uncertainty that's in the economic environment, it makes it difficult.
And Chair, just to clarify, if, I appreciate, I agree with your proposal to bring this back, but just to understand, if we do not vote on this tonight, there will be no communication for this budget season on this particular topic to the commission from the BAP, because we will be out of time.
Yeah, I might just, if staff feels it's appropriate, we might just say, we are, just to inform the commission that we're looking at.
Based on the recommendations of this year's rec, we're gonna take a deeper dive into each of them.
Yeah, you have one more joint workshop with the city commission as well as part of the budget development process. So it's.
There would be another.
Yeah, so it's not the absolute last moment.
Okay, gotcha.
In August, you'll be meeting with the city commission to talk about the proposed budget as they prepare for the full budget, which includes not just general funds, but all of the funds.
So I'll just inform them that we're gonna take a deeper dive into it, and that we will probably have a little more discussion, presentation at our next workshop.
Awesome.
Okay. Very good. Are there any board member comments? We'll go around robin. Great. I have 7:02, so we kept it. Right, it's almost about 2 hours. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.